if you think it, act on it. Because so often, people will say things like, there was something about that guy that was just odd. It was off when they walked in. It was like they already had an agenda. We can, in the sue happy world that we live in, that's always a risk. But is it when you think about lives being at stake? We have people that are trained to engage a conversation. And then depending on how that conversation goes, that may lead to the next step, whether it's we may need to do something a little more forcible in order to remove them from the mass of people that are there, or to get them additional help. So often it's like, you don't know what to do, and it's say something. Find someone. If you don't know what to do, talk to security, talk to a leader.
Welcome all. Lieutenant Dan. My real name is actually Dan Chillis. Hello all, and welcome to episode 6 of the Workplace Violence Mitigation Podcast. I am your host, Lieutenant Dan. I have a special guest with me today. We're going to focus a little bit on another aspect of the workplace violence thing. I have Pastor Stacey Brown with us from the Living Water Church in Bolingbrook, Illinois. And we're going to talk a little bit about the churches and houses of worship and how they're addressing this issue with the uptick in violence that we've seen. Unfortunately, a lot of these houses of worship have become prime targets, and there's some reasons for that, and we'll talk about that as we move forward. But Stacey, if you could please, or Pastor Brown, I should say, I apologize. If you could please give the listeners a little bit of your background and let them know a little bit about Living Water Church.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I am Pastor Stacey Brown. I serve here as the executive pastor at Living Water Community Church in Bolingbrook, Illinois. And I have been on staff for almost 20 years, but I've been a part of this community for almost 45 years. And so I have a unique perspective from the congregant side as well as from the workplace side in terms of what we've seen and how we try to ensure not just the safety of those who work here, but the safety of those that worship here. And so there are a number of things that we are putting in place and have certainly researched and tasked our teams with making sure that they are aware, because we don't have the privilege of just sticking our heads in the sand.
Yeah. And, the churches and the houses of worship are somewhat unique in that, for some of the people that you bring in and that need the help from the church have emotional problems, have mental health issues, have addiction issues, all of which can lead into violence, unfortunately. So it's a delicate balance between how do you get these people the help that they need, how do you do God's work, and how do you protect the people that work there and the other congregants. So it's kind of a balancing act. Can I ask you, have any of your congregants come to you and expressed concern about this, or asked about what is our plan, or how are we going to address this? Are we going to do anything different, particularly in the immediate aftermath after you have an incident at a house of worship?
Well, we have definitely had to field questions about what are we going to do, or if something happens within our community. And our church is uniquely positioned between three multifamily developments, townhouses and apartment buildings, where there are a lot of people in a very small space. And then a lot of these residents are also great places for people to have their first introduction into suburban life. And so we get an influx of folks from urban settings that are now here in the suburbs, and it is an adjustment for them. And there are times when, things follow them into the suburbs. So our congregants definitely want to know. One of the things that I think helps in keeping some of the questioning down is we actually have an active security team that serves every Sunday. There are people literally in the hallway, so not just sitting in the service and therefore not as diligent or vigilant as they could be if they're facing the doors, so to speak. So we have a security team that is outside of the main sanctuary doors. And we also have a parking team. And so they are in the parking lot, and that kind of gives us a, hey, something's going on out here. Almost sometimes if you're aware of it before it actually makes their way into the building itself. And so then after our security team, we have what is called our first impressions team. And so they are like the hosts and hostesses of the service. So they too have gone through some training to be aware, suspicious behavior, um, uh, fidgety people that just can't seem to settle down and get comfortable. We have a team that will go and ask, hey, are you good? Is there anything we need to get you? We have invited people to leave the service and sit with us in the atrium where they can still see and hear everything, but we can kind of better assess what is going on with them. And of course, we do the normal things like we put no guns on the door, the sign for that and things like that. But having people actually watching while others are worshiping, we have found to be very helpful and has kind of stopped a lot of things before they've gotten out of hand because we've dealt with more situations in our atrium because we have a very large and open space that wraps around our auditorium than we have actually in the auditorium because people are out there watching and questioning and, you know, um, interjecting if there's something that seems a little.
Sure, sure. When you talk about your security team, are they um, from your congregation? Are you hiring somebody from the outside? Where are you getting these folks, and where are they? When you're training them up for these roles, how are you handling that?
Sure, they are from our congregation. And so when they join the team, we go through the background check and do those kinds of things. Typically, we find a lot of times they are people who have either law enforcement backgrounds, maybe they're guards, ex-police officers, some are active police officers, that kind of thing. And so they kind of comprise that team. And then we do at least annual training with the team at large outside of someone new coming into the team and needing a much more thorough understanding of rules, regulations, what we do, what we expect, how they are to conduct themselves, as in a sense, our peace officers as well.
Right.
They're not in uniform, but they are wearing identification.
Okay. Are these folks, and if I ask you anything that is in your best interest to keep to yourself, by all means say, I would prefer not to answer. Are
Sure.
these folks armed or are they unarmed in your meaning your security team?
Hmm. They are unarmed. We do have a few, let's just say they're similar to air marshals.
Okay.
Um, so they're not identified, but they are present and
Gotcha.
they are armed.
Nice. Nice approach. Very nice. Um, have you noticed any decrease in attendance, especially in the immediate aftermath of an event? So, a lot of these disasters in these houses of worship quickly become national news.
Right.
Does the Sunday that follows, does that Sunday service, does attendance drop off? Do you think it spooks people or no?
We have not had that kind of a reaction. It certainly does become conversation. We've often prayed for those churches that were affected as part of our service that Sunday, but we have not seen a notable, dip in attendance immediately following. Um, a situation elsewhere in the country. And maybe some of that is because it's just not been as close. We're outside of Chicago. So typically here, if something is going to happen along those lines, it is unfortunately anti-Semitic in nature. And so it's typically aimed at the temples that we have here and synagogues in the Chicagoland area, as opposed to just any house of worship, being under attack.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, have you guys changed any of your in response to some of the things that have gone on? Because I don't think anybody could make the argument that these events have not increased in frequency.
Absolutely.
And I'm always taken back a little bit by, churches or houses of worship or anybody for that matter that makes the argument that we never would have known. How could we have known, or how could we have expected? At this point, I mean, it's gotten to the point where these things are so frequent that people are starting to become numb to them, which
Yeah.
is also a very dangerous place to be. And we're trying to heighten awareness. So, are you starting to see any concern that people are just accepting this as being part of the norm, as far as this just happens, as opposed to we really need to plan for this and taking some kind of action to step up the planning or the training or revisit the plans that you have in place?
I think it's a great question. I feel like because we meet with the teams, we call our volunteer dream team. So we have probably 4 to 6 meetings with these groups, and we bring them all together. So if there's been an incident or something that we need to be aware of, we discuss it amongst this gathering of volunteers, because the assumption is the average person sitting in the seat is going to look to one of us to say, well, what am I supposed to do in this situation?
Right.
So because we're pouring into this layer of leaders that are kind of spread throughout the different areas of the church, it gives them more points of contact for what should I do if. We, of course, encourage people to be, how did I say it? Innocent as wise as wolves, but innocent as doves. We want them to not have just this overriding fear anytime they leave their home, but at the same time, we don't present it as almost like this is an ivory tower and no trouble can ever come near us, because we recognize that's just not the world we live in. So we have some things in place, like our children have a check-in. Every person that works in that area is background checked. And they have to have been here a certain number amount of time before they're even allowed to serve back there. Because again, I can know you for 2 weeks and not really know you. So we try to make sure that there's a window of time that we get to know these individuals, but have to pass it. And then that room is closed up, if you will, during a normal services. So like even in our kids' auditorium, the doors don't open from the outside. They only open from the inside. So there's some things that we've kind of added as kind of security measures. Maybe they're low-key security measures, but nonetheless, to kind of help parents have a greater sense of comfort when they check their child in, that there are trained people who are there not only to handle a medical emergency, but to also know what the lockdown procedures are, should there need to be a lockdown procedure. So my hope is perhaps because we've not just shy of talking about it. I would say, though, honestly, for us, our bigger issue is to the one that you spoke of in the intro, which is mental health. We have an uptick in people who are battling mental health. And so that's that delicate balance of we want to help you We want to support you and be here for you, but we also need to protect you from us and protect you from ourselves. So as far as our community is concerned, we are very fortunate that all of our ambulances can do on the site evaluations. And so that is probably at this point the biggest emergencies that we've had is we have had to call for people to have an evaluation. I had a gentleman literally talking to me, and security was standing nearby, but we knew that he was having some issues. And he literally pulls out a pair of snips and says, "Can I have your finger? I want to show you what I didn't do." And I was like, absolutely not, sir. 911 was immediately called. And we can, I'd rather have to apologize for misunderstanding something someone said, but we acted, appropriately, than to say, well, we didn't know he was going to go to that extreme. Hey, this is the world we live in, and we will activate as me.
Right, right. Yeah. And it's, I think it, houses of worship are not much different than a hospital when it comes to, dealing with mental health issues. A
Yes.
lot of people gravitate there. Again, the doors are always open. We're here to help. We're here to do God's work, and I understand that. But people, and the active shooter events are horrible, right? When you get these folks that plan these attacks out and they execute them. But just as deadly can be the homeless person that is dealing with mental health issues or substance abuse issues that comes in looking for money for drugs and goes crazy with a pocket knife. I mean, many people could be injured or killed under those circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we're back to the fine balance between we want to help these folks, but we also need to protect the people that are here and make sure that nobody gets hurt. So it is a difficult thing to balance, and I'm glad to hear that you're taking some steps um, to fix or address those things. I shouldn't say fix them. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about the things that you have in place when you look at churches as a whole and these smaller houses of worship that are in more rural areas or the inner city where funding for security folks or even training is very difficult to come by, and they tend to not prioritize things, putting security first. So they would, if they had collected $1,000 in the collection plate, they'd give 900 of that to the food pantry and then leave themselves exposed. I mean, it's and
True.
God bless them. I understand where that's coming from. However, it does present a problem. So, is there a way that you know of within the church communities where they can get funding for some of the training and things that they should be having that they're perhaps foregoing because of those issues?
Sure. Obviously, there are plenty of places that they can pay to get that kind of training. But I am a big fan of, we have community church in our name, and there's a reason. It is our belief that we are part of this community. And so as part of this community, we have direct access to our police chief and to his team. And we have gone and said, would you be willing to send an officer over to address our group about this particular danger or that particular danger? And we have found that they have been willing to do those kind of things. So whereas we may not have community dollars or dollars, set aside for that, oftentimes the department does have outreach dollars that we, the community, have paid for with our taxes. And so we're able to kind of lean on those relationships to say, could we have someone come out and address our team about this? Or we're seeing an uptick in this. Can someone come and help us address that? We do have homeless in our community, and because we have open land, as part of our property parcel and some forested areas in the back. We literally had a group decide to go and camp out there and light campfires during the winter, which of course greatly disturbed the neighbors on the other side of the fence. And
Sure.
so we literally worked with the police and other township departments within our community to say it may be our property, but it's not just our problem. And so in with that kind of mindset, the police worked with us. The group that does clean up the not really garbage disposal, but the city workers also helped with some things because we realized some of it was way too convenient for people to come and set up house. And so there were things that needed to be done. And we sat down and we talked it all through and decided who could do what. And then we just got people, volunteers together to go and do it. So we cleared out a lot of underbrush. We, left privacy trees because we respect our neighbors, but we the things that were there that just made it very convenient for someone to just come in and set up house, we dealt with those things. And so utilizing your community contacts is huge. Checking in with the chamber to find out, are there either other nonprofits that have certain things, partnering with another group to say, okay, it may cost $500 to get this group to come in and do this training. But if we all participate, we can break those dollars down. So we have a clergy association between our town and Romeoville. And so when we need to do a big cost type of training, we invite all the churches and we shoulder together all the costs. And
Sure.
that help bring down an individual's church's exposure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And have you found that to be something that is utilized appropriately, or do these other congregations not come in and play? I mean, how many times have you done this type of training where you're getting everybody together? Because it's a great idea.
Yeah. It's really more of a 60-40 situation. You throw the net to 100 and you get 40% that will come and be a part of it. Some will say, oh, we do our own thing. We have our own training. We have our own policies and procedures. And that's great. I mean, every church should, right? Every business should. But at the same time, sometimes getting those experts in is just too costly for one group to do. We see that work and sometimes, it doesn't. We have installed a door lock system that works with a security camera. And so now for our groups that meet in the evening, when there's not, so we're not talking about the 600 people being here in a day. We're talking about 40 people being in the building, kind of a deal, behind closed doors. So we lock all the perimeter doors, and they have to have this app on their phone, and they can use it as a card reader, at the card reader to get access to the building. So is it aggravating? Sure, because if I just decide out of the blue I want to join this group, but I didn't sign up for it, then I don't have access. And now I have to wait a week to do it properly in order to get this app and get added to the system so that they can have access to the building. But we found that honestly, it was more cost effective than trying to find additional volunteers to watch the doors in the evening. And this way, the camera records who comes in when you came in. So I can not only match your name and profile, but I've got your picture and I need to know, who was the person that walked in right behind.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's I find as I've been doing this, so I was in law enforcement for 24 years, long time doing police work, and there tends to be a line drawn through the security process that people don't, that gets blurry, right? You have the locks on the doors and whatnot. which is great for securing the facility and for protecting, like the situation you described, where you've got 40 people in the building for a meeting in the evening after hours, and they want to make sure that nobody comes in behind them to do their thing, right? And then if they do or even attempt to, you've got means to perhaps identify those folks. And then when you're talking about the mass shooting events, you're talking about a person who is so over the edge, not necessarily, by the way, mentally ill, just over the edge. I call it the rubber band factor. They're wound so tight, the stress is so much that eventually it just pops,
Yes.
right? And they go and they do this, but they're coming in as one of the congregants. They're following in with everybody else. They blend into the room, so there would be no means to keep them out of there, which is
Mhm.
where the training comes into effect, right? Not just training your team, and we've all seen some pretty impressive security reactions to these events, right? Where you've got people, like you said, former law enforcement or military that have volunteered their time and are present and are very hyper situationally aware of circumstances. And the bad guy does his thing and is immediately neutralized by one of these folks. And that is fantastic. But if you watch the remainder of the video, excuse me, you will see that most of the other people in the room are deer in the headlights. And what do I do? Where do I go? So the training for the masses, I think, is what's important and even more difficult for houses of worship, because you don't necessarily, you have your regulars, right? They're there every Sunday, and then you've got this very large transitional group that are there for a couple of months, and then all of a sudden you don't see Mr. and Mrs. Jones, and then they come back. So
Right. Right.
how do you suggest that places like churches like yours try to address that? And I've got a lot of ideas, but I'm also trying to draw from your expertise so that we can expand on what we can offer folks to make them safe.
Mm. That's a very good point, because you described a great deal of people that attend church today. They're here for a few weeks, they're gone for months, and then they're back. So even if you had a training, they missed it because they weren't here during the time that it was hosted. Um, I think we've had in the past an emergency, not an emergency, um, a congregant handbook that we've given to people that were present, and what it did was it just kind of encapsulated a lot of different things that you may not know about the church unless you've been there for a long time. From uh, where the extra bathrooms are, to where should you go depending on where you are if there was inclement weather. That kind of, all those kind of things. And so we haven't done that in a while, but it certainly seems like that could be another way to communicate these things to people, um, that should at least give them some inkling of what to do or what is expected. Here, get under a chair. Go. We have obviously emergency doors, and they're lit, during service and things like that. But just ensuring, it is something that we are definitely lacking in, because it's something that we have not addressed in quite some time. How do we get this message across? And then there's a couple of ways we could record something and add it to our website so that anyone planning to visit would have access to that. We actually do have a handful of people, I would say 2 to 5 people a week, that will find us on the internet and let us know, because we have a plan your visit little button there. And that's something that could be included in that as well, to just say, when you're on site, here's some things we'd want you to know. And include some safety tips in that. Um, But, I'm thinking back to childhood. I mean, everybody knows stop, drop, and roll. Why do they know that? Because we were taught it. It was drummed into us. We heard it at school. We heard it on TV. We heard it over and over and over again in all these different places. And, um, we tell people, please be aware of your surroundings. Always be aware of your surroundings. But it's certainly something we could do a
Yeah.
much better job at addressing.
It's interesting that you should use the stop, drop, and roll reference. I do public speaking engagements about this topic all over the country. I do a lot of them, and I frequently will use the stop, drop, and roll analogy
Mm-hmm.
to work people into the run, hide, fight concept. And I always tell them that you remember, everybody remembers what to do if your clothes catch fire. I said, and it's very simple. I said, and really, when you think about it, they start teaching that in what, kindergarten, first grade is first exposure to that. I said, it's not necessarily because they believe that these kids are not able to comprehend something a little more advanced. I said, but when you're on fire, you're not thinking clearly. Stop, drop, and roll is about the only thing you're going to process. So
Mm-hmm.
let's not overcomplicate the response to this. Um, we've here at the institute, we've started to take some snippets of our live training and put it into an online process. Um, do you think that that would be helpful to some of these congregations if we had a course that was really targeting what to do when you're in church on Sunday and how to what to look for and what to react to? Would that be something that would be you think would be helpful to get the message out a little more?
Absolutely. Because again, n- it's not that it's not our first thought, right? When we are pulling up into the building Sunday morning, it's just not. Yet, the more places that can be reinforced, then it becomes, like you said, just more rote than anything else. To think about it, I will do these things, and that will at least give me my best chance. We're not guaranteeing safety. We recognize we can't do that in the world that we live in.
Right.
Wish we could. However, we can equip, we can give people information and ideas. We can encourage them that they can have a role to play in their own safety. That is not just up to them to come to some place and expect that someone else is going to take care of them, but that they have a role to play in their own safety.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Pastor Brown, when we wrap these things up at the end of each episode, I usually like to give um, the guest an opportunity to share something based on their unique experience that our listeners can take with them a snippet, a tidbit, gold nugget, whatever you want to call it. Now, you're in a very unique position because I believe that you have a direct line to the man upstairs, right? So you can share that as as well. But
Really?
if there's anything in your experience that you think um, can be helpful to other congregations, other pastors, other church leaders, other boards for some of these massive churches. I actually attend Parkview in Homer Glen, and it is when you go to the Orland facility, it's kind of like a coliseum. I mean, it's massive in there. So, and I was part of their security team for a while, and then they made some changes that just were not conducive to where I thought it should have gone. So I decided to step back. But anything that you can share with our folks that might be listening to this episode that would be helpful.
Right. I would say number one, partner with your community. We know that you as a church have limited resources, but a lot of times those resources exist in your community, and you may have to do a little work to partner with them to get access to them, but it's well worth it. And then the other thing that I would really say is if you if you think it, act on it. Because so often, people will say things like, "There's something about that guy that was just odd. It was off when they walked in. It was like they already had an agenda." Um, Again, I know in the sue happy world that we live in, that's always a risk. But is it when you think about lives being at stake? Um, we have people that are trained to engage a conversation, and then depending on how that conversation goes, that may lead to the next step, whether it's we may need to do something a little more forcible, in order to remove them from the mass of people that are there, or to get them additional help. But so often it's like, but you don't know what to do. And it's say something, find someone. If you don't know what to do, talk to security, talk to a leader, call the non-emergency police number if you have to, because a lot of times they're willing to come and just peruse or come and check things out just in case, because nobody wants to deal with the aftermath if we can head it off before it happens. And
Right.
so that's, I think, just so key. Sometimes God has given us that little warning bell that goes off, and we want to talk ourselves out of it until
Absolutely.
until it happens. And so
Yeah.
we need to act.
Yeah. No, you're it's always better to ask forgiveness than to go, oh, I was right and I should have said something.
Yeah.
Now look at what's happened. And I think your message here is great, which is, make sure that the people in your congregation know who the trained individuals on those security teams and the leadership in the church are. So if they see something, they've got somewhere to go to say something, right? I used to get people all the time that would, like I said, Parkview is a pretty large facility, and they would come up to me and say, "Hey, the guy over there in the black T-shirt, never seen him before. Something is not right. Did you see him?" And I'm like, "I actually saw him when he came in, and yeah, we're keeping an eye on him." And now you can position your team members around this individual, and just from watching their actions, assess perhaps what kind of assistance they need, or if it's more than assistance they need, and they're possibly there to do harm, like you said, contact the police and just say, "Look, we've got somebody in the midst here that's never been here before. Something is not right. Can you send a squad over?" And head
Absolutely.
it off before it's so deep in the weeds. Because when these things explode, when that gun comes out, one person is shot every 15 seconds. If you're talking about a church filled with people, that's a
Right.
giant barrel filled with fish. I mean, it's just going to be really ugly really quick. So perfect, wonderful. I can't thank you enough for taking some time to spend with us and share your experience and your knowledge on this topic as it relates to your specific venues, because I don't think people talk about it enough. We all pray
Oh,
about it in the aftermath
right.
and shake our heads and say it shouldn't have happened, but how do we prevent it from happening again? Or how do we minimize the impact that it would have? So
Right.
thank you again, Pastor Brown. For those
Absolutely.
of our of you that are listening, please make sure you like and share our podcast. We want to get these information out to everyone we can. We don't take sponsors. We are not a sponsored entity. So we're truly trying to get information out to save lives and livelihoods. And the only way that we're going to do that is by people sharing this information. So we'll keep bringing it to you. You keep sharing it. Until next time, Lieutenant Dan, and I am signing out.